Today, we will learn to create a Power Virtual Agent bot that you can ask questions to ChatGPT and also Dall.E to generate images for you in the same UI in less than 10 minutes. Most chatbots end conversation once a response is given. However, in this tutorial, we will address how to keep the chat rolling and create a more conversational experience. Let's get started. Coming to the OpenAI API documentation site. Because we are not building the chat bot from the ground up, that is not going to be happening in 10 minutes. We just simply calling the API using our Power Automate within the Power Virtual Agent. So we just need to understand how the API call works. So let's address the elephant in the room, the OpenAI API. Coming to the text completion section, you can see the endpoint we're going to use is here, using the post method. In your header, you need to have content type and authorization to have your API keys. And then the prompt is where you put your text. Actually, if you have a look at the parameter, this is something we're going to put it into our Power Automate. So you have the OpenAI model here, you have the prompt here, which you probably guessed we're going to use a variable coming from PVA by taking user's input instead of a hard-coded prompt here. Max return token, we're probably going to tune that to the maximum, which here for newer models, you can have to 4096. So just be aware, we can't have a long conversation with the bot because you're gonna hit this limit very soon. So this is just for the experiment purpose. Temperature, the lower the number, the more realistic the answer is. It's between 0 to 1, and if we have up to 1, it will be very creative answers. Stop is where you want the bot to stop. And this is the response will look like. After you put this parameter in, supply as the input, the DaVinci 003 will return, because our input is say this is a test, and this return is this is indeed a test. So this is just simple example. Okay, so this is the image. Sorry, this is the text completion, and let's have a quick look at the image. For the image, very similar. You're gonna use a different endpoint to make the API call. The parameter is even simpler. I think we're gonna just use the N for the number, so we'll change to 1. Just one image will be returned to our PVA, and I will reduce the size, maybe to 512. It'll make it a bit quicker. And the API will return a URL of the image it generates using Dall.E, and that's what we're going to use to display image back in our Power Virtual Agent. Now let's go to Postman and do our API test before we actually use it in the Power Automate. So you're going to click on a new test, change this to post, because remember in the API call documentations, we're going to use the post actions. Pretty much we're going to use a header to put your API keys there and a body to put the actual request. Okay, so let's go back to your documentation. So let's test the text completion first. We'll copy this. In the header, we will use 2 keys. First is called the content type. Value is JSON. Put N. Relation for your API key. Make sure you have bearer space, and then copy paste your keys here. in the body, we'll just copy the whole thing for now. In the raw. Okay, that's it. Click on send. Okay, while I pause the screen, I have added my API key. So let's do a test. I click on send. Okay. So looks like it didn't return anything. We're supposed to have a result here on the text. Now it's empty string. Finish reason is stop. So it stopped for don't know whatever that reason is. So let's how about we remove this stop. Make sure rid of this comma. And just remember, this is just a sample from the website we just copied without any modification. So sometimes there will be errors from their documentations. How about we change the prompt to say something different? How many days in a week? Maximum token, let's just change to the maximum based on documentations. Go send. The maximum token length is that, and we request more. So maybe let's change this a bit lower. 4,000. Instead of go max, let's try that and go send. Okay, that worked. It returned a result that there are 7 days in a week. Excellent. Well, so this will be the format we're going to use in the Power Automate. Now let's do the same for the image completion. Okay, we'll do the same thing for the image generation for Dall.E. Pretty much just use a different endpoint. And I'm going to copy the parameter here as a body. Go back to my Postman. I've already done the headers here, so I'm just going to paste the request body here. And remember, we said we're going to change the return image, just one is enough. Reduce the size by 12 and 512. Let's execute baby C other. Let's just change it. How about a whale? Okay, and then we go send. Now the return result is going to be URL, which we're going to open it within a browser, and this will be sent back to our PVA and display in the card. Here we go. Oh, it's a terrible image, but anyway, so that's how the API call works. We've tested within the Postman, and this is how we use it in the Power Automate. Back in PVA, I have skipped ahead, create a bot with a new topic called OpenAI and some trigger phrases. Now let's add first step. We're going to ask user a question. We're going to ask, what would you like to do? It's going to be a short question. We're going to ask user whether you're going to do an image or text. No, this variable, we're just going to give a name called var choices. I don't think we're going to use that. Right, so when the user selected image, we're going to call the image endpoint in the Power Automate. If you select text, we're going to call OpenAI text completion endpoint in the Power Automate. So that's going to be two different flows. And let's start with the image one. So if user select the image, first we're gonna ask a question at the user input to pass on to the OpenAI. So we're gonna say, what would you like to draw? And we're gonna take the entire user's response as the input. Let's call it the image prompt. Next, we're gonna take this input and pass on the OpenAI using Power Automate. Call action. We're gonna create a flow. Now ignore the one I already created when I did my test. We're gonna create a flow. We'll give it a name. OpenAI text prompt. And then we're gonna add a action here. Now there is already an OpenAI connector here. This is a text completion connector that's been made by someone already. In this tutorial, we're not gonna use this existing connector. We're gonna build our own, and we're gonna do it for the image as well as text completion. So all we need to do is select HTTP instead. We're gonna select HTTP connector. And remember the test we did with Postman, this is where you're gonna use it. You're gonna use a post. The URI is here. This is image generation for the Dall.E. Come back here, we're gonna put this. In the header, we're gonna put content type, that application JSON, and this is gonna be authorization can't spell for your API keys, and the body is where we're gonna copy the content. Okay, so come here. Very simple. We're gonna copy this. I'll come back here. Okay, so now to use it within our flow, first we're gonna create a variable to taking the input from the PVA and pass down here. Right, so instead of we hardwire this value, we're gonna create input. Let's call it PVA input, and we're gonna match this to the user's response that's been provided in the PVA. Okay, sorry, this is image we're doing. So yeah, image. And here we're gonna delete the hard-coded value. Replace with the variable. I'm gonna return one image in the size of 512 by 512. Okay, that's it. Now from the test, we know the API will return the response of the URL of the image. So we're gonna pass the URL back to our PVA. So we'll call this PVA image URL, and we're gonna use expression to pick up the contents of the URL. I can probably see from here it's in the data array, and there's only one item called URL. And we're gonna use the body function similar to the one we did last time. with my previous video. Okay, so the expression we're gonna use is body, and the step name is HTTP. That's your previous one. And we're gonna take from data array with item URL. Okay, so we click on OK. And also I fixed my API keys in this step. And that's it. Let's click on save. So we're gonna call this OpenAI text prompt flow back in the Power Virtual Agent. So let's switch back to the Power Virtual Agent, and then we'll wait for this to finish saving and show up in our, here we go, Power Virtual Agent. So the name is OpenAI text prompt. Come back here, wait for it. There's some confusing name that I made previously during my test. So it's called text prompt. Yeah, a few seconds ago. This is the one I did previously. So let's pick this one. Here you go. So for the input, we're gonna select this var image prompt from PVA, pass on to the input variable of the Power Automate called PVA image prompt, and this will be sent to the OpenAI. OpenAI send back a URL, and we store in this PVA image URL variables. What we're gonna do with that? We're gonna add a new step, send a message, pretty much return the image URL back to the user. So in the message, click on this drop down, we're gonna go image. All right, message here say this is the Dall.E 2 impression, and let's go to image here. We're gonna put a function here. So let's click on this function expression button here. And the one we're gonna use is called topic. And we want to take that PVA image URL out of it to return to our user card. So we go insert. And then we'll add an end conversation after that, save. So the URL will be returned and displayed in this media card. And that will be the end of the conversation. So let's try that. Trigger phrases, OpenAI. We want to do image. What would you like to draw? A bright pink sky. And see what we get returned. So here we go. Not bad. And that's it for our image generation branch of the PVA chat. So this is how usually a flow within the chatbot ends once the response is returned. But what if you wanna keep doing the image generations like normally we'll do on the OpenAI website without keep triggering the phrases? And there's no perfect way of achieving this. All we can do is ask a follow-up question straight after this message. Let's say, would you like to try it again? And the choice will be yes and no. So the no, let's just name it, make it nicely, image choices. So the no, we'll take it back to end of conversation, so at all other conditions. But with a yes, if you either select yes basically we're going to take the user back to the first question here. So what would you like to draw? And we will stay within this flow without going back out. Okay, so we go add a question. If they go yes, we will go call action, topic management, go to step. Now this is a new feature. I believe you have to create a preview bot with a new authoring experience. Well, go to step. Here, what would you like to draw? Okay, now let's save it and see what happens. We'll trigger called OpenAI. Go image. What would you like to draw? A car. Make it simple. And we will get a follow-up question after the image returned. Is would you like to try it again? And if I go yes, watch what happens. You should jump back to the question says what would you like to draw? Which is right here. What would you like to draw? And hey, I didn't ask again. Let's keep drawing. Now this is called an infinite loop. Let's stop it and explain why. The reason being is, would you like to try it again? Let's go to the property here. In the question behavior, we need to make sure we ask this every time. If we don't, it will just skip it and automatically assume you want to do it again and become an infinite loop like we just saw. Alright, so now we've changed the property of this question, would you like to try it again, to ask every time. And let's test the bot again. To the image. Remember, every time the AI will draw different image, even with the same prompt. So would you like to try it again? We go yes. And it should ask me the question. Aha, I made a mistake here. This question needs to be changed too, so it will ask us every time, what would you like to draw? I do not want to draw the car again. So let's go to the first question. What would you like to draw? We go to the properties, go to question behavior, ask every time. So for both questions, what would you like to draw? Which is the image prompt. And the second question, would you like to try it again? Both questions, we need to make sure it asks every time. Okay? So let's try this one more time. OpenAI, let's do the image. A fish. It should return an image of a fish, ask me to draw another one, and also ask me to provide a new prompt. What would you like to draw? A dish. So as this, it will not exit the loop until I hit no. So that will be the end of this image branch. Okay, so we will use the same concept when we try to stay in this conversation with text completion in the next part. Now let's move to the text completion part of our virtual agent bot. Just to point out, I made a mistake previously that the flow we made for the image prompt, I named it wrongly as text prompt. So what I did is I went back to the Power Automate, renamed the name from text to image, and I just came here to refresh it and it's got updated. There's no other changes required. Okay, so going back to our text prompt, if the choices is equal to the text, we will follow the Same principle we just did with the image generation. First, let's ask a question. What would you like to ask? We'll take the entire user response and we'll call it text prompt. Next, we'll call the Power Automate. So we go to the action, we'll create a flow. So we'll call this OpenAI text prompt. This is text prompt. The other one we did previously is image prompt. Text prompt. In here, follow the test we did with Postman. This is all the same. We're gonna pick HTTP connector. The method is post, and we're gonna use the text completion endpoint for text prompts. Do that. And I will fix my header and authorization and the content type, and then the body. So the body, we said we're just going to copy everything but make a few modifications. So come back here, we'll copy the body, paste the body. First, the prompt will be a variable. We'll come up here, we'll add a input called PVA text prompt. And here we'll pick the PVA text prompt. Maximum token, we're gonna choose 4,000. Temperature, we'll make it 0.3. And let's remove this stop because it was stopping our bot to respond. And then when it's returned, the text prompt will be returned. So we'll call it PVA text response, and the expression we're gonna use is similar to the one we used before. The expression we're gonna use is this. Also body function, taking the previous step, which is called HTTP. In the choices array, we're gonna take the text output out. Okay, so just go save, and we're gonna return this PVA text response back. Click on OK. Save. So we're looking for the OpenAI text prompt flow back in the PVA. So let's wait for this to be saved. And then we'll move back to our Power Virtual Agent. Hopefully you will see this new flow we just created. Okay, so PVA text prompt a few seconds ago. OpenAI text prompts. Here we go. Right, so we are passing the input from this var text prompt to the automate flow. So select var text prompt, passing that to Power Automate, and this is the return response, PVA text response. And what do? We just create a message and display that straight back to the user. PVA text response, just a simple variable. And then that will be the end of conversation. Save it, and we can do our test with the text completion branch. So starting from here, let's reset this bot. We'll trigger it, go OpenAI. This time we're going to go text, and it should flow down to this other branch. We'll go, what would you like to ask? When is Australian Day? Then the PV will go call the Power Automate flow, do an API call with OpenAI, and return that. Okay, so that's it. That's the end of the conversation for our text completion part. Now, what if you want to stay in the conversation and keep asking questions, having a chat? You don't want to keep retriggering the OpenAI trigger phrases here. And not only that, you want to pass the previous conversation history back to the API call, so the chat will have a context. Now let me introduce you to Remi Dyon's LinkedIn article. Excuse my French. He has created an article here to basically teach you how to get around that problem within the Power Virtual Agent. And that's where I get the ideas from. So I will leave the link in the description below. Now let's just have a look how we're gonna do that in the PVA. Basically, you're gonna create a new variable, and this variable will not only store user's input as a text prompt, it will also reserve the previous chat history. It just keep rolling and building up and pass everything back to the ChatGPT API call. Sorry, the OpenAI API call. So let's go back to the Power Virtual Agent here. Now, before we ask this question, we'll set a new variable. Set a variable I'm going to create a new variable. Let's call it var conversation. And initially, we want to set it to an empty array, which means if the conversation is ended and it flows down from the trigger coming down here, this variable will be emptied. Otherwise, you will keep building up and you will hit your token limit. So we want this one to be reset every time before the conversation. Then we'll ask user a question, what would you like to ask? And this text prompt has user input. After this step, we want to set the variable value again by picking this new variable. And the value of that is, here we're going to use the expression. So basically we want to add itself, the var conversation plus the value of text prompt. So the expression we're going to use here is, we're going to take the value of itself plus the user input. Now, after the first question, of course, this is empty, there's nothing there. So pretty much the var conversation is the same as the var text prompt. It has the same value. But as we loop on and stay in the conversation, this var conversation new variable will start to have the history of previous chat. So let's go insert here. And the way to achieve that is after the response was given by the API call. Under here, we're gonna set the variable one more time. We will select the var conversation, the new variable. And this time, we're gonna give the value of itself plus the response from the API call. It's gonna be topic.pva text response. Go insert. So pretty much we have given this variable value 3 times. First time, we have given the empty string. Second time, we have given the value of itself plus the user input. And third time, the value given is itself plus the response from the API call. After that, we're gonna ask user a question, just like we did with the image generation. Would you like to know more? Give an option of yes, and then an option of no. Now, if the choice is yes, let's call it text retry. Again, this doesn't really matter. We're not gonna refer back to this variables. Now, if the choice is yes, what do you want to do? We want to send this back to the question again. So we're gonna go topic management, go to step, and step we're gonna go to is the first question, just right below the empty area, below the new variable. So this is the new variable, right below that. So if you either choose yes to ask a follow-up question, we're gonna loop back to this step, and it will take another user input. And this way we will also avoid the first set variable value to the empty string. So the variable that stays in the conversation will not be cleared out. So you will come here, ask question again, and the second question gets added to the end, get appended to the end of last response. Now remember the problem we had before about infinite loop and skipping questions. We'll do the same here. Go to the first question, go to property, make sure it will ask every single time. And we'll come to this retry question, go to the properties, ask every single time. That's it. Save and let's test the bot. And lastly, coming to the Power Automate actions here, we're gonna select this input. Instead of passing the pure user text input, now we're gonna use a new variable called the var conversation, which will include the history as well. Save. And let's do a test with the text completion branch. We'll reset the bot. Typing our trigger phrases. Go to text. How about 10 plus 4 is hope it's 14. Then the follow-up question, would you like to know more? I'll go yes. Let's see whether the bot remembers, has a context of history. How about multiply another 5? The answer is 70. That's correct. Let's try again. Then minus 4. Do you know the answer? 66. Okay, now let's reset this because I'm a bit worried about we're hitting the token limit. This is the end of the conversation. Let's ask another question, more text-based. Let's say, who is Elon Musk? Would you like to know? Does he has a brother? Yes, Elon has a younger brother. Excellent. Now, if we go to the Power Automate, we can clearly see the history has been passed on to the next input when you ask second question. So the bot will have a context. So if we come to the response here and go to the raw input, you can see my first question is, who is Elon Musk? Then it had a response of the question. And then it had my second question, does he have a brother? So this is how the bot knows the previous conversation and try to provide a similar experience as ChatGPT, but as you can see, it's not very fluid because we have to rely on asking a follow-up questions like this. Would you like to know more? Same case for our image generation. We have to ask follow-up questions. So that saves you from trigger the phrases again, but also keep you in the conversation with the text completion. Okay, so that's all from me. Hopefully we all learned a bit from this quick tutorial.